Okay, everybody, welcome back. This is Coach Rob, and this is my coaching log here at Pause Performance Coaching. And this is FTP week. We started off the week talking about why FTP is not a gold standard, what it is. Then we progressed to how to improve your odds of having a great FTP test outcome. Today, I want to talk a little bit more about how to apply some of those results to your training mix. As I said earlier, FTP is what I use in my practice as a baseline test. It's what we use to set training zones, and then we use it also to kind of gauge how somebody is moving forward in their performance. However, there are certain disciplines where they're not steady state oriented, road racing, shorter duration, running events, track and field events, things like that, where I can work with a power meter and an athlete. Then I will probably do something different. We will probably be working on things like peak power output. What is your peak power? We may even do my version of power profiling. Let's talk a little bit about what those tests look like. As I said in the previous in the previous video, an FTP test in this practice is primarily a 20-minute effort. We take the average power of 20 minutes, we multiply that by 0.95 or 95%, and we get your FTP. Now, for better or for worse, that's how this practice runs. That's been my baseline. It's what I've been doing for a very long time. I'm very happy with it. We have other tests that we do. I have different versions of the FTP test for various reasons. There are people who are coming to me that are coming from an injury, and there are people who are coming to me that have never had a successful FTP test. They drop power, they lose comfort. I have to train them to learn how to build up the necessary steady state mindset to have a successful FTP test. You'd be surprised how often that happens in very elite racers. These aren't newbies. These are people who really are pushing the limits of their bodies, and they aren't accustomed to this because they don't do steady state work. They're criterium specialists, cyclocross, short track mountain bike, you name it. Some of them are downhill mountain bikers. So in those particular cases, there are things that we have to do differently. One of them is a ramp test. And there are many versions of the ramp test, but instead my version is more akin to what I discussed in the previous video, which is, starting off at about 82 to 88% of FTP, and then over the course of 20 minutes, clicking into a bigger gear potentially. Yes, RPMs may drop, that's fine. And then as you progress upwards, about every 4 to 5, maybe 6 minutes, you click into a harder gear and you're pushing out more wattage. The reason why I do the test like this, quite honestly, is because instead of thinking of it as a 20-minute block, oh my God, I can't focus that long. Instead, we're looking at 2.5 minute to 6 minute long intervals. That way the athlete has less on their mind that they can focus on. So it's another trick that maybe I didn't interject in the previous video on how to have the best possible FTP test. It's just another added one. But in this particular one, I wanted to talk to you about taking that information and being able to apply it to your training mix. So as I said in the previous video also, specificity is king. It really is. So depending on the type of work you're doing, remember I said you can go and find the intervals in your workouts. If you haven't learned how to do that yet, definitely look at products like Golden Cheetah. Much easier to do than products like Training Peaks, especially the web version. WKO, yes, that would be easier to do than the Training Peaks online. But Golden Cheetah is free. It's actually built into the product where you can look at your activities and you can start to get an idea of what your training mix is based on the outcomes of club rides, your runs, your races, whatever it is that you're doing. And then what we do with that FTP data is that now we're looking at a percentage. And what's really interesting about this is applying it to your training mix allows you to be able to, once again, use that FTP number as a gas gauge of kind. So if you found out that you're doing the Tuesday night Worlds and maybe the Saturday night club race, and you're discovering that a lot of your intervals are somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 minutes to 6 minutes long, and maybe you're not the one that's finishing at the end. Maybe you're not even in the mix as being a decision maker in that race, and you have a really good idea of what that mix is, the length of effort required. Maybe there's a climb involved. Maybe you're just missing out the last 5 minutes. You're just running out of energy. You can use that information, know what your FTP is, and then start trying to pull the right intervals together at the right percentage of your current FTP to keep moving that needle forward. Now, I know that I'm not giving you a lot of pretty pictures here and a lot of charts and graphs. And some of that is simply not because I'm being lazy, because I need athletes. And I can't give it all away, but I can certainly try to do my best to describe what I'm talking about here. If you have more questions, I would certainly like to hear them. You can leave a comment below. The other thing too that I would say that becomes relevant, in the whole specificity aspect of this is that, with FTP not being the gold standard, it's not the end all to be all. We have other tests available to us. The peak power output test is pretty important in the development. With my athletes that have been with me for probably 3 to 4 years. I would say that those that come to me as rank amateur beginners, Cat 5, brand new folks, that if they're really dedicated and very consistent with their training, we're probably going to get a lot out of them in the first 2 years, maybe 3 years on traditional, what I would call FTP work. And then what happens is that they start to find that maybe midway through a race season that those numbers start to flag a little bit, or they plateau. Well, I start to push them into what I call the Tmax Protocol. I did not invent that. They came from an Australian coach. And what's really interesting about the Tmax Protocol is that it focuses on peak power output, not FTP. And what it is similar to a Wingate test. It's a ramp test. And usually you want someone there with you because you truly want your focus on putting the most effort into that bike. And you do it on a smart trainer ergometer. You can do it on a classic trainer as long as there's a power meter involved. It's really not going to work with heart rate. It really does have to be done with a power meter. And in that test, what we're doing is we're trying to find what is your peak power. We're not talking about the power that you can produce in a second or two. No. Peak power isn't defined that way. So let me give you an example. So we start off at 150, maybe 110 watts, and every minute we crank it up another 10 watts, and we do this until failure. Now, what does failure look like on the bike? It doesn't mean that you break a leg or you fall off your bike. Instead, it means that you can just no longer effectively turn the pedals over. When you're smoked. Lactic acid builds up so much that your quadriceps, everything is completely and utterly pumped out. Your heart feels like it's going to jump out of your chest or out of your throat, and your lungs are on fire. So I think we understand really what failure truly means in this. This isn't like weightlifting where you do repetitions until the muscles just physically no longer work and you drop the weight on your toe. Instead, that is really what I'm talking about, is that you just can no longer effectively move or put force into the pedals. Then what we do is we take a look at the final result. What was the peak power that you produced just ahead of failure? What was that top number? That's peak power, not what you do in 1 second or 2 seconds or 3 seconds. No, it's what you can do at the end of a ramp. That's how I define that. I then take that interval and we do some things with it. And I'm not going to give away all my secrets, but if you're interested, you can certainly look up Tmax intervals and learn more. And I have written about them at positiveperformancecoaching.com, and I'll see if I can find that and put a link in the bottom. If not, just look up Tmax intervals. You'll probably find an old Bicycle magazine article on the subject, and you may find some of the original sports science studies that were done on the focus of Tmax intervals. It's a fantastic way of building somebody's FTP really late into their practice and program, especially mid-season. We've done a steady diet of sweet spot work, another VO2 work, things like that. The other thing too to remember is that I don't know if there's a true ceiling to FTP, meaning that you're an elite pro and you've hit 400 watts for 20 minutes and that's it. Absolutely not. There are athletes that go much higher than that. And if we're talking about watts per kilogram, that could very well, depending on your weight, be well above 4 watts per kilogram. I've been often asked, especially now that Zwift has become so popular, what is a top watts per kilogram number? And I can tell, I was doing an investigation of the Amateur National Time Trial Championships a few years ago. And I know the course well. It's in my backyard, or at least it was. It's not now, but at the time frame, it was hosted here for 2 years. Typical USA cycling, time frame for a nationals event and hosting for a host city. And the young man that won it, kind of getting a good idea of what his weight is and his height. I was able to calculate that he actually, over that, it's roughly a 30-kilometer course if memory serves, he was able to hold close to 6.1 watts per kilogram. And that might be a mind blower for those of you who are out there in Zwift land, but it wasn't too surprising, quite honestly, for those that can really be still and they can put out a lot of power and they've got the right weight. You can be absolutely devastating. I know that young man on the downhill finish on that time trial was, I think, in excess of 55 miles an hour on a false flat downhill. So there's a lot to this, and there's no shortage of things that we can do to move the needle. It's not all about FTP. There are so many more things that we can be doing to help you. And I hope this was helpful. This maybe I should have scripted this a little bit better. Maybe it should have been a webinar. Quite honestly, I've been overthinking this. It's something that I've been rolling around in my head for a while, and we may revisit this in the future. But there's been so much going on with FTP with my athletes right now. There's testing, there's racing, and of course, Zwift hinges a lot on FTP numbers based on watts per kilogram. So that's one of the reasons why this is a big concern with athletes these days. So if you've got questions about this or any of the other previous shows, let me know. I also ask that you share. Please let others know about this channel so that we can grow the audience. As I said before, my initial goal is to have 100 subscribers. Right now, as of this recording, I have 10. And I'm really pleased with that growth, believe it or not. We're just getting started. We've only been doing this for a handful of weeks, and I'm pretty happy with that. And there hopefully will be more soon. If there are topics that you think that you would like me to cover, let me know in the comments, and we will do what we can. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your training week, and I look forward to talking to you again really soon.